So hello, everyone. Thank you, Brooke. My name is Jenny Coates. I'm associate professor at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. And I'm going to be giving the overview and introduction along with our colleagues at the FAO Food and Nutrition Division, the Nutrition Assessment Team. So this learning lab is about innovative tools to inform diet-related policy. And you're going to be hearing about two different kinds of tools today. One is the FAO WHO Global Individual Food Consumption Data Tool, or GIFT. And the other is the INDDEX24 Dietary Assessment Platform. So the slide that you see in front of you now, that you've been looking at for quite a while now, is a picture of our INDDEX team. And many of the folks on this slide you will be hearing from today. You've already heard from Holly Perlick, who also wears another hat in her work with the Amana project. So next, please. And you will also be hearing from this fine group of people who represent the FAO Nutrition Assessment Team within the Nutrition Division at FAO. Next, please. Okay, so I'm going to just review the agenda for today. We're going to kick things off by just very briefly going through some of the questionnaire results. Thanks to all of you who filled out the pre-session questionnaire. And I know you're busily filling out the Poll Everywhere poll at this very moment. So we look forward to seeing those results in a second. I'm going to review the objectives of the Learning Lab today after we go through the results of the polls, and then give a very brief overview of some of the individual level dietary assessment methods that exist. We'll talk a little bit about those methods, and then you'll hear more about some of the strengths and weaknesses of the various methods, as well as the different kinds of applications for policymaking, programmatic decision-making later on from our FAO colleagues. So after my presentation, I will hand it over to Bridget, who's going to give us an overview of the FAO WHO GIFT platform. And following that, we're going to have an interactive exercise where you'll first of all get a brief demonstration of the GIFT platform, and then the FAO team is going to break everybody out into a set of breakout rooms where you're going to have a set of very challenging and interesting exercises that will promote you to think about how to draw on the features that GIFT offers in order to inform some decisions that you'll need to be making. So after that, we will come back to the INDDEX team, and my colleagues Brooke and Sarah are going to be offering an overview of the INDDEX24 Dietary Assessment Platform. And then from there, we will wrap up. Okay, next, please, Brooke. Okay, so thank you. So everybody's been very busily responding to questions about your favorite fruit. There was quite an assortment of fruits on this page. I hope that, it looks like for many of you, your favorite fruit was missing. So terribly sorry about that. We actually had to cut out a number of different fruits that were originally on this list in order to fit them on the screen. So, but of those of you who found a fruit in here that you considered to be your favorite, it looks like apple was by far and away the winner, followed by mango, my personal favorite. So oranges and papaya were high up on the list, pineapple and jackfruit, not too shabby, banana, avocado, and custard apple as well. So thank you everybody for responding. It's nice to know where we all stand in terms of our dietary preferences. Next, please. Okay, so now just a little bit more information about all of you and where you're all coming from. So thank you to the 74 of you who found the time to respond to our brief questionnaire. So according to that questionnaire and the results that we received, looks like the geographic focus area of most people's work is Western Africa, followed by Southern Asia, and Eastern Africa close behind. We also have, representation here where people are working in Southern Africa, Southeast Asia, a few people concentrated in Northern America, and Europe didn't even make the cut. So anybody out there who's working in Europe, apologies, but you didn't make the list. So the other question that we had asked was whether or not people had any experience collecting dietary data. And it sounds as though 3/4 of you almost had some experience, some of you probably quite a lot of experience collecting dietary data in some form. Next, please, Brooke, thanks. And we had also asked what type of dietary assessment method you had used. And it was very interesting, I think, for us to see that of the different methods that we had listed, that it seemed like many of you had, or most of you who responded, had some prior experience using a 24-hour dietary recall. And this contrasts actually with the Learning Lab that we offered a couple of years ago, in which most of the people who responded had been primarily familiar with the shorter dietary screeners like the minimum dietary diversity score. So we also have some experience with food frequency questionnaires, some with the diet quality screeners, diet history. You'll see that we cover many of the bases amongst the participants in this session. Next, please. All right, great. So now just to talk a little bit about the objectives of this Learning Lab. One of the things that we are going to be spending some time on today is really talking about the uses and the advantages and disadvantages of a range of individual level dietary assessment methods, both quantitative and qualitative. And we're going to be focusing in on the 24-hour dietary recall method and dietary screeners. And the reason for that is that both the INDDEX project as well as the GIFT platform draw on 24-hour recall and 24-hour recall method. We also are going to be focusing on the dietary screeners because we know that there's a lot of interest and a lot of application of the dietary screeners out there. And so we thought it'd be particularly helpful to be able to make that kind of both the kind of contrast, the comparison, and also think collectively about how those two different approaches can be used to complement one another in order to inform policies and programs. So the other objective of the Learning Lab is for all of you to come away with a better understanding of the many different ways in which you can use individual quantitative food consumption data that's available through the FAO WHO GIFT platform. And then similarly, that you'll have an understanding of several of the key features of the INDDEX24 Dietary Assessment Platform, and be able to think about how to apply these tools in your own work. Next, please. Okay, so I'm going to just introduce very briefly, you can go ahead, Brooke, some of the individual level dietary assessment methods. I suspect that many of you who have joined us today actually have more of a grounding in this than we had perhaps assumed in advance. So apologies if this feels like it's too rudimentary, but I hope it will be helpful for some of you to dust off the old nutrition assessment textbook and be thinking about this in terms of how it would apply to your current work. So before we think about actually think about different dietary assessment methods themselves, it's helpful to take a step back and to reflect on the criteria that we would want to consider in choosing which type of dietary assessment method would be most appropriate, most suitable for a given objective. And so there are a range of things that we want to keep in mind. One has to do with, the nature of the information needs. To what extent do we need to be very granular in our understanding of diets, right? Is it enough for us to know that people have consumed something from a general food group, like fruits or vegetables? Or are we really interested in knowing something much more detailed about the kinds of fruits that people are consuming? Like we really wanted to know who in this group preferred mangoes over apples. A second type of information need to consider is to what extent does the set of decisions that you're interested in making really rely on some degree of quantification. Okay, so many of these methods are differentiated by the extent to which they are able to quantify the amount of food and nutrients that people are consuming. And so having a good sense in your mind about whether or not your end goal really can benefit from some quantification is helpful in distinguishing and determining the choice. Another issue is the question of comparability, right? So we know that some of these methods are particularly good at producing information that can be compared from one setting to the next, whereas others are more limited in that vein. All right, so once you've really had a good grasp on your information needs, another consideration has to do with the validity and reliability of that method for the particular purpose. So as you're thinking about, how valid, how accurate, how reliable, how precise are the results from a particular dietary assessment method, what you should be also doing at the same time is weighing that against the degree of precision or accuracy that you need for your given objective, okay? Maybe you just want a general sense of a trend, okay? Maybe you just want to know, generally speaking, are people in one particular population group beginning to consume a healthier diet overall? Is a greater percentage of the population consuming fruits and vegetables than were before? All right, so that might be general enough for your situation, or you might really want to know the extent to which people in your population, according to different population groups, are actually consuming at a given level, right? Are they consuming at least 400 grams of fruits and vegetables in a day? So that might be something that we need to know, and we need to know more precisely for our decision-making purpose. And so later, Bridget is going to be talking in a bit more detail about the different kinds of decisions that you might want to make related to, that are informed by dietary data, and how to help weigh these considerations in a more practical, applied way. Okay, so the third consideration that's very important to keep in mind is, of course, the resource requirements, right? We know that some dietary assessment methods are very time intensive, they're more costly, and require kind of higher level of training and familiarity with the method itself. Another set of considerations have to do with the usefulness of the data that result from the dietary assessment method, right? So some methods produce one very specific piece of information, like a diet screener might tell you something about a few components of the diet, whereas some of the other methods give you a much broader picture of the whole diet, and therefore are more flexible in terms of being able to be reused for multiple purposes. Another consideration is the timeliness of data availability. We want to think about how easy or difficult it is to adapt the instruments to different contexts. And we also want to think about, the extent to which we can communicate results based on the findings that we achieve from those methods. Okay, so those are just a few considerations, not an exhaustive list, but something to keep in mind. Next, please. All right, so now many of these then will look familiar to a lot of you, but just to remind us, when we talk about individual level dietary assessment methods, we are not talking about food balance data at this point, which is really focused at a national level. We're not talking about household consumption and expenditure survey data, which is focused at a household level and doesn't tell us about individuals. We are talking here about individual level dietary data, which is where the, the data are collected from individuals and are about individuals. So we have a range of methods. On the one hand, a weighed food record, for instance, where people are required either to self-administer, or an enumerator observes the food that is consumed throughout an entire day or a series of days. Self-administered weighed food records require literacy and numeracy in some cases, and people record all the food that they've eaten and beverages in a diary or on a tablet. Another example is a food frequency questionnaire. Food frequency questionnaire is typically designed for a specific purpose and may, but doesn't always reflect all of the components of the diet. And it's a very commonly used instrument for epidemiological studies. Biomarkers are not technically a diet assessment method. They obviously tell us something about the nutrients that are derived from the diet, and they don't always have a one-to-one correlation with food intake, although there are certain biomarkers that can tell us very specifically about some kind of nutritive element that people have consumed. And then 24-hour recall, which we'll talk more about in a minute, and dietary screeners, which I'll also talk more about in just a second. Next, please. Okay, so just to give you an overview of the 24-hour recall. So 24-hour recalls are a method that provides comprehensive data on both the type and quantity of all the foods and beverages consumed over the previous 24 hours. One of the benefits of a 24-hour recall is that it offers a higher degree of precision and information relative to some of these less quantitative methods, like the dietary screeners, which tend to be more qualitative in nature. So we know that portions are quantified using portion estimation aids. We're not just limited to a predefined checklist of foods that we're asking people to respond to. We're getting information on the whole diet. The information is elicited using a multi-pass method, which I'll talk about more in a second. And that's intended to reduce some of the cognitive burden and to aid the recall of the respondent. It's not always perfect, but it helps. And another benefit of the 24-hour recall is that in the process of deriving food by food or dish by dish information from the respondent, one is also able to capture very detailed information about the brands of foods that people are consuming, where they consumed it, and other kinds of descriptors related to either eating behaviors, the food environment in which they consumed it, or some other kinds of attributes of the foods themselves. For instance, the 24-hour recall also takes into account the different preparation methods, and then also factors in those preparation methods in calculating the estimated nutrient content of those foods. Next, please. So here's an image of the multiple pass method, okay? So the multiple pass method, as I mentioned, is designed in order to ease the cognitive burden on the respondent of remembering everything that they ate the previous day. It's an internationally accepted method that has been shown really to improve the overall accuracy of the results. And different tools, different surveys have used different numbers of passes, but the one that we see most commonly is 4-pass method. And in the first pass, the enumerator makes a quick list of all the foods and beverages that were consumed during the previous 24-hour period. So the respondent brainstorms all of the foods and beverages that they ate. In the second pass, the enumerator assists the respondent to go back to each of those different foods and beverages to begin to acquire more detailed information. So at the second pass stage, we're gathering more information about the attributes of those foods and beverages, including different kinds of descriptors or probes that tell us, was this an apple with the peel on or off? Was it red or green? Was it organic or non-organic? Those are the kinds of questions we would ask in the second pass. In the third pass, that's where we actually try to quantify the amount of that food or beverage that was consumed. And then there is also kind of an intermediate step in there where we need to record and process information on anything that is a recipe, a mixed dish that's unique in that household. And then the fourth pass is a final review of the overall collection of information. Okay, so now just a few more slides on my end, and we're going to be talking about the dietary screeners. Many of you, I hope, were able to attend the other learning lab, which was held on Monday, where Anna Herforth and colleagues presented on the work that they've been doing to develop a very brief dietary screener that tells us about diet quality globally. It's going to be implemented through the Gallup World Poll. But dietary screeners in general are a class of instrument. Typically, they are a form of a short food frequency questionnaire. And one of the things that's kind of a hallmark of a dietary screener that makes them kind of quick and dirty, so to speak, is that it doesn't, it kind of skips that portion estimation stage. A dietary screener is intentionally designed because it's shorter and quicker, it ultimately results in information that is about a more limited number of food groups or about specific foods and beverages that are consumed. So it can capture certain diet factors, but is really typically not designed to capture the whole diet. The estimates that result from those screeners are often qualitative in nature. And one of the things that is, I would say, beneficial about the dietary screeners, like a food frequency questionnaire, is that the recall period is typically longer. So with a 24-hour recall, of course, it's 1 day prior. And in order to really get a picture of usual intake through a 24-hour recall, we do need to implement more than one recall. For a diet screener, we're actually able to capture a longer period of time, which is beneficial. It gives us a picture of usual intake. But one of the downsides, of course, is that the cognitive burden for the respondent of trying to recall, what did I eat 30 days ago? And how do I give an answer to this question that's asking me to recall something over the last 30 days when maybe my diet has varied over this 30-day period? It's very tough. And because of that, the diet screeners have greater systematic measurement error in general. They also lack detailed information about food preparation, specific foods and beverages consumed, brands, those kinds of things that we tend to be able to get from a 24-hour recall. But a major plus about the diet screeners is that they are very quick to implement and fairly easy to process as well. Okay, I'm getting the signal that it's time to wrap up, so just a couple more quick slides. So this is an example of a dietary screener questionnaire. This one comes from the National Cancer Institute. And what you see here is that, it's a pretty simple set of questions. Down the left, you'll see that all the different foods and food groups that they ask about in this dietary screener. And there are basically 2 questions for each type of food or food group. The first question is whether you ate the food or not. And the second question is how often. Next, please. And this dietary screener will be probably familiar to many of you. This is the minimum dietary diversity for women questionnaire. Next, please. All right, so just to summarize, we can see that there are a number of different methods that exist for collecting individual dietary data, and there are trade-offs that have to be considered in determining what kind of method is most appropriate for what kind of application. On the one hand, you see here over on the left side, we have methods that provide much more information at a more granular level. They're more flexible for a whole range of analyses. And yet they do have a slightly higher, or even in some cases much higher in terms of the weighed food record, investigator and respondent burden and cost. And then at the other end, we have information that's less, less broad, less holistic. It's also less flexible for analysis, but it also is lower cost and lower respondent burden. So kind of right in the middle, in the sweet spot of all of this, we in terms of the INDDEX project and also the FAO WHO GIFT platform, have placed the 24-hour recall. Next, please. And so what you'll hear about, for the rest of the day today, and you can just skip ahead, Brooke, and kind of flash the different questions here, is, ways in which 24-hour recall data can be collected more seamlessly and more quickly than it has been before. So that's through the INDDEX24 Dietary Assessment Platform. And then you'll also be hearing from FAO, WHO, GIFT about the platform that is built on top of 24-hour recall data. And because it's such a versatile type of data, it can be used to answer a whole range of different kinds of policy relevant questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bridget Holmes, I should say, who is going to talk about the FAO WHO GIFT platform and give you a demonstration, which will lead us into our breakout activity. Over to you, Bridget.
Thanks ever so much, Jenny. Just bear with me a moment while I share my screen. Okay, everyone should be seeing that now. Is that okay? Good. Okay. Thanks ever so much for the introduction. So because of the technical glitches at the beginning of the session, I'm going to try and kind of speed up a bit during this session. So just want to first of all introduce the nutrition assessment team. So there's only some of them here with us today. But this team is made up of consultants and officers working in dietary data, composition, and also diet diversity and diet quality. So here with us today, we've got Agnieszka joining us from Poland, Teresa joining from Italy, Jacqueline joining from Brazil, and Pauline joining from France. So they'll be helping talk us through the breakout sessions shortly. Okay, so what I want to do first of all is start off by thinking about how we can use dietary data. And this slide you'll see at the very end is actually will become as full as it can be. So there's many uses of dietary data. So the first one that I want to illustrate here is about understanding food consumption. So this is quite a basic use. But basically we can use dietary data to understand what people eat and drink, but also what people don't eat and drink. We can use it to understand the eating context, so where people are eating, where they're eating, with whom they're eating, and other types of information about meal patterns. We can also understand it to understand differences, in food consumption patterns, so according to age, gender, income, or different types of living situations, so for example, rural or urban, and also high and low consumers of certain foods. We can also use dietary data to understand about how local foods or wild foods contribute to adequate diets. Of course, linked to this is the understanding of nutrient intake. So we're able to use dietary data to provide evidence on energy nutrient intakes, to compare intakes with recommendations, to investigate the sources of nutrients in the diet and deficiencies and excesses, and also understand about diet quality and diet diversity. From this information, we're able to prioritize issues and concerns. So identify areas of concern in the diet, identify populations or population groups of concern, research healthy and less healthy eating and dietary patterns, investigate the links between diet and health, so investigating things like non-communicable diseases. We can also use dietary data to monitor and evaluate. So monitoring dietary trends and shifts in patterns, evaluating the impact of interventions or policies and programs, and tracking progress, for example, looking at the progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. We can also use dietary data to assess the environmental sustainability of food choice. ultimately to inform food and nutrition policies, nutrition education programs, food and nutrition guidelines, food fortification programs, and food safety and agricultural policies. So we'll be giving you a few examples of these during the session today. So I'm not sure if you'd already realized this, but essentially dietary data are critical for evidence-based decision making, and this will become clearer throughout the Learning Lab. So with this in mind, I'd like to share with you some information on the Global Individual Food Consumption Data Tool, or GIFT as it's also known. And this was developed by FAO in collaboration with WHO, together with other international partners, and it's funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this tool serves as a platform to increase the availability and use of individual quantitative food consumption data from all countries around the world, collected through both large nationwide and small-scale surveys. So what this platform does, it's actually enabling the sharing of dietary data, which is done freely, but it provides a support for policymakers and program planners and many other stakeholders in taking informed decisions at the country, regional and global level to improve health and improve nutrition. So I just want to show you this slide that we have, is one of the slides that we have to illustrate what kind of information we have in the platform. So this map gives you the information where we have dietary data available. So what we have is a combination of both metadata, which is more or less summary information, and also microdata, which is the actual survey data available to download. So we've got information on nearly 300 surveys worldwide, with around 25 data sets available for downloading and further analysis. And from this image, you can just see, we've highlighted here the Philippines, and you can see for this country, we have information on both metadata and microdata from different years. So the platform provides easy to understand food-based indicators for nutrition and food safety, infographics and visual representations of data, metadata summary statistics, and microdata for downloading, as I mentioned, for further analysis. And the information is really focused towards low and middle income countries. But ultimately, all of these elements provide evidence for informed decision making. The type of data that we use and we include in the platform is based around the 24-hour recall method that Jenny explained earlier, and also the food records. This information that we integrate must be quantitative. So that means that we have information on the amounts recorded, and it covers the whole diet. So we have information on all foods and beverages consumed. So we integrate data which is already matched with food composition, and where the amounts and nutrients are reported as consumed. And preferably, we ask for recipes to be disaggregated into single ingredients. We include data sets on surveys that have at least 100 subjects. So as I mentioned earlier, so a combination of national surveys, but also subnational and smaller surveys, depending on the country. So from this slide, you'll see a few examples of the challenges that we have with regard to food naming, and the reason why we need to harmonize data. So the same food may have a different name, as in the case of aubergine and eggplant, but also cookies and biscuits, or palm fruit and ice apple. Or a different food may have the same name, for example, chips and crisps. There's often a big confusion about these. But a food may have also an incorrect name that's widely used or incorrectly by locals, as in the case here for mutton and goat. And all of these different factors make our job working with dietary data pretty complicated. And it's for this reason we need to harmonize the data. So because of the huge variation that we have in foods consumed between countries and regions, and because of the fact that we have these issues with the multiple local and international names, we must harmonize the data before it's shared in the tool. So we use a system called FoodX2, and this is a comprehensive system allowing the classification and description of foods. It's developed and managed by the European Food Safety Authority, and it's a common language across databases worldwide. So the same item can be referred to in different ways. The example that you should see on the screen here is for a food which is called kaki in Denmark, but also called the persimmon in the US. It's actually the same food and it has the same code. So what I'd like to do now is just give you, hopefully if it works, a live demo of the platform to illustrate some of the key features. And I'll do this quickly because I know that we don't have much time. So hopefully you should be now seeing website. So I'll start by highlighting some of the different aspects on the tool that are the most interesting for you today, but perhaps somebody could share in the chat the link for the tool, and then you can always have a look at your leisure. So on this map, this is the one that we were just looking at. You're able to click on a country or a region and investigate to see if there's any data. So for example, I've just clicked, hopefully you can see here for Brazil. And there's quite a long list of data available, a combination of metadata. Also, this box in orange you should see, which means that the data should be soon inserted, which means we're going to have national data for Brazil available pretty soon. You're able to filter this map on different elements, so you can search for a country or a different type of area. Then under this tab, Data and Indicators, you have the opportunity to explore the data that is available. So you should be seeing now on your screen a list of different countries and data sets. So here you can see, for example, all these different countries and several pages available. You can click on indicators. Then what you have is, for example, this data set we're looking at is for Argentina. It gives you some information about the age groups that are available and where the data was from. You're also able to filter the data by different groups, different types of areas, etc. And then down here, a bit further down the page, hopefully you can see this. You have some indicators. So you have one for food consumption. Let me just check we've got everything. Yes, here we go, one for food consumption. And you're able to investigate different elements of the diet that you'll be able to test yourself during the breakout session. So here you can look at the grams per person on average. You also have a tab for food safety where you can look at very high consumers of certain foods, which is very useful for food safety. And then you have the third tab for nutrition, where you can look at different elements related to micronutrients, macronutrients, and things like the sources of the nutrients in the diet. So please do have a look at the website when you get a moment. So moving back, what we'd like to do now is a short discussion or a short interactive session. So what we're going to do is ask you a few questions, and if you could use the reaction button, hopefully there's a reaction button that you can see. It might be under more. Yes, and then you have reactions, I think. So the first question, is, has anybody kept track of their own food intake before? Okay, so I'm seeing a few waving hands, great, super. So any kind of, hopefully there's smiley reactions or thumbs up you can do if you have kept track of your own food intake before, super. Good. Okay. All right, then next question. Who thinks that their diet is different on a weekday compared to a weekend day? So either raise your hand or a reaction. 10 people have raised their hand, 12 people. Okay, quite a few people, 14 people. My goodness, a lot of people here think their diet is different. I'm not surprised. Okay, but that's interesting. And that's one of the reasons why we often need multiple days, as Jenny mentioned in her introduction, that it's not enough just to have normally just one day of information. Okay, next question is, has anybody collected dietary data using a 24-hour recall before? So quick raising a hand, waving, thumbs up. Okay, quite a few people, that's great. All right, super. And okay, next question. Has anybody collected dietary data using a screener before? So Jenny mentioned a couple in her introduction. So there was the MDDW screener. There was also another screener. Okay, quite a few hands raised. But maybe fewer hands than for the recall. Okay, interesting. And then last question, has anybody collected dietary data using both? Let's say in the same study or the same moment. 4 people. All right, brilliant. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks ever so much. So that's really helpful. So thinking back to the poll that some of you completed at the beginning, I'm not sure if you managed to complete this question. I know not everybody managed to do it. But there was a question about, do you drink tea? And if yes, what do you prepare it with? And then we'd listed out a few different things, different types of water, milk, herbs and spices, etc. So what I'd like to ask you is, if you could again raise your hand, or wave, or show a reaction, if you think you can capture this information using a 24-hour recall. So if you had a tea, what would you prepare it with? Who thinks you can capture that with a 24-hour recall? All right, the numbers of people are increasing. Good, okay, 14, 15. Okay, it's going up. So it looks, I can't see everybody, but it looks like there's a lot of people who think that you can capture this information. So indeed, yes, you can. And then who thinks that you could capture this information if you were collecting data using a screener? Okay, one person, I think, 2. Okay, so I think, yes, majority of you are right. In fact, this type of detail wouldn't normally be captured in a screener, but it really depends on the type of the screener. Okay, and then the last question, this question about the fruit. I'm sorry that some of the fruits were missing off the question. Quick show of hands or reactions if you can capture this information using a 24-hour recall. Okay, look, few people raising their hands. So we'd assume that, you know, if it's a favorite fruit, you'd be eating it on a regular basis. Okay, good numbers of people raising hands. So indeed, you should be able to capture that if it's consumed regularly, especially if you're carrying out a recall for more than one day. And then what about capturing that information using a screener? Hands are going down. Yeah, indeed. So it's less likely that you'd be able to get this information captured if you were using a screener. Okay, thanks ever so much, everybody. So just to summarize, this slide is just showing some of the key characteristics that you might compare between 24-hour recalls and screeners when you are selecting a dietary assessment method. So as Jenny mentioned, there's really a wide variety of screeners available, so it's quite difficult to categorize them. But I think what we can say generally is that a 24-hour recall will cover the total diet, whereas a screener will normally only cover one or a few components of the diet. A 24-hour recall does capture information about the context, so information on timing and location, etc., whereas a screener doesn't normally. But a screener can be used to assess diet in the distant past, which can't be done for a 24-hour recall. Both methods allow cross-cultural comparisons, normally, but again, slightly depending on the design of the screener. But one of the main advantages of the screener is the speed that it can be collected. So generally they're done in less than 15 minutes, whereas for a 24-hour recall, you're looking at least 20 minutes. Both methods require some reliance on memory. And then finally, indeed, we're only integrating data from 24-hour recalls and food records into the FAO WHO GIFT platform. So a quick refresher back to this slide at the beginning, which was very full on all the uses of dietary data. And then we've now mapped these to 24-hour recalls and screeners. And I won't spend a lot of time going through this, but I think just to illustrate the point that although 24-hour recall method may take more time to collect and analyze, there's also much more that can be done with the data once it's collected. So yeah, just to highlight that, maybe in the interest of time, I won't spend too much time going through that. So now what we're going to do is move to a breakout session. Hopefully, Hallie will help us to do that. And in these breakout sessions, you'll be able to see how the tool works, and then we'll come back and discuss how everything went. I'm going to speed through this because I know that we're kind of running a bit short of time. So just wanted to bring everyone back to thank you for your participation. Thanks very much to the volunteers who participated in the exercises. I don't think we'll have time to go over any of the things that came up, but we just wanted to basically give you these 3 exercises. They were slightly different. One of them was kind of identifying crops that could be promoted to improve diets and considering options for fortification. The second one was the healthcare worker in Mexico, kind of understanding current intakes and also comparing with dietary recommendations for fruit and vegetables. And then finally, the third one was the nutrition officer in Lao PDR to understand potential ways to increase iron intakes. So those were just 3 example exercises that we wanted to share with you. So maybe if there's just maybe a quick check to see if there's any queries that are outstanding. Otherwise, I think we can continue to answer your questions in the chat. And then I can hand over to Jenny, maybe just to summarize. The key message was really that, you know, the first step towards any effective intervention is having reliable data. And despite the need for data, we still have this huge knowledge gap. So our team are obviously working on that to bridge the gap. So as we already shared in one of the groups, at least, if you know of some data that isn't already included in the platform, or you have data to share, please do get in touch. So with that, I think we can hand over to Jenny for her presentation.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. Actually, I'm going to turn right around and pass it off to Brooke, who's going to be giving the overview of the INDDEX24 platform along with our colleague Sarah Waffa. So go ahead, Brooke.
Great, thank you, Jenny. And thanks, Bridget and team, for that great presentation on the GIFT platform. We're going to transition and look at the other end of 24-hour recalls and look at our INDDEX24 Dietary Assessment Platform, which is a data collection tool. So to start off, I will hand it to my colleague Sarah Waffa, who is a researcher on the INDEX project, and she'll be starting us off with an overview of the platform. Take it away, Sarah.
Thank you, Brooke. All right, so this slide presents the overarching aim of the INDEX project, which is to increase the availability, access, and use of dietary data in low and middle income countries. We do this through the project's primary objective, which is to develop new technologies to standardize and streamline the collection and analysis of individual level dietary data. It was with this objective in mind that we developed the INDDEX24 Dietary Assessment Platform, which is, as Brooke just mentioned, a tool used to collect data. So this diagram presents an overview of the INDDEX24 Dietary Assessment Platform, or INDDEX24 for short. The platform is composed of 4 main components. First, we have the Global Food Matters Database, or Global FMDB for short, which is designed for storing dietary reference data, including survey-specific food lists, food composition information, recipes, food descriptors and probes, and portion conversion factors. The Global FMDB is linked to the Survey Management Interface, which is used for managing various aspects of the survey, and as well as developing additional survey modules beyond the 24-hour recall. The Survey Management Interface links the Global FMDB to the INDDEX24 mobile app. The INDDEX24 mobile app uses the multiple pass method, which was described by Jenny earlier, to collect 24-hour recall dietary data on a mobile device. Last but not least, the platform includes data analysis tools, which are linked to the 3 other components. These tools allow for exportation of both raw and processed data. So if you are a user preparing to conduct a 24-hour survey using the INDDEX24 platform, you would first go into the Global FMDB, which has been zoomed in here, and search to see if dietary reference data are available for your country or region of interest. For example, if you are a user planning to conduct a dietary survey in Niger, you would search the Global FMDB to see if any dietary reference data are available for Niger or for West Africa, and that if you could use them for your survey. You can also prepare and upload your own dietary reference data, and the zoomed in image here depicts the 4 different types of dietary reference data. So we have the food composition table, the recipes, food descriptors or probes, and portion conversions. So once you have copied and or compiled the dietary reference data required to conduct your survey, you can send the data to the INDDEX24 mobile app via the Survey Management Interface. You would then use the survey management interface to make text, language, and certain question modifications in the INDDEX24 mobile app. You can also add modules or questionnaires outside of the 24-hour recall to the INDDEX24 mobile app using the interface. Once these customizations are complete in the survey management interface, you are ready to collect data using the INDDEX24 mobile app. Once data is collected, you can use the analytical reports to run a gaps report, which will identify gaps in the food composition table and conversion factors to enable complete data processing. You can also use the analytical reports to produce results which consist of a set of process data and basic summary statistics in which foods are converted into gram weight equivalents and matched with food composition information. The platform also allows you to download the raw data files from the dietary survey to conduct further analyses in a statistical program. So that is from start to finish, the steps that a user would follow when using the INDDEX24 Dietary Assessment Platform to conduct a 24-hour recall survey. So Brooke and I will now talk about some of the highlights of each of the 4 components of the INDDEX24 platform. The Global Food Matters database is a centralized, accessible repository of dietary reference data, so the 4 types of data that we just saw in the overview diagram. It enables data sharing among users. Users can also download their data to their computer and work offline, which is particularly useful in contexts where internet connectivity may be a challenge. Data are seamlessly linked to the INDDEX24 mobile app, which allows for customization and easy updates. Foods, recipes, and ingredient names can be translated in up to 4 languages for each survey. So that allows the application and data to be collected in up to 4 languages for each survey. So with that, I'll pass it over to Brooke.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay. So just continuing with describing some highlights of the different components of our platform. The survey management interface, as Sarah mentioned earlier, offers a number of features that enable INDDEX24 users to prepare the mobile app for the user's specific survey context. So users can create additional survey-specific modules to add to their survey in addition to the 24-hour recall module. And a number of modifications can be made to the INDDEX24 app. These are listed on the screen, things like text translations, adapting and formatting text. And then there are certain customizations available to users of the mobile app, such as choosing between having auto or manually generated respondent IDs for your survey, hiding and unhiding certain questions depending on their relevance for your context, defining default responses, as well as adding questions to the 4th pass of the survey, of the 24-hour recall, excuse me. And then other types of preparations that are required for your survey you would do in the survey management interface, such as creating user accounts for your enumerators who will be collecting the data. Researchers can also use the survey management interface to conduct data monitoring during the survey. They can monitor performance of enumerators, looking at things such as the time to complete the recall, as well as reviewing responses from the survey. And then finally, we'd also like to highlight that the survey management interface is where researchers would go to access the analytical reports and gap reports that Sarah mentioned in the last section. So continuing with just going over some highlights of the INDDEX24 mobile app. The mobile app is designed for offline data collection, so it can be used in contexts where internet connectivity is unreliable. Data can be collected offline and then uploaded to the survey management interface when a more reliable internet connection is available. It also uses researcher-defined dietary reference data, which, as we saw in the diagram, is linked with and comes from the Global Food Matters database. The mobile app also has a number of features that can save time when conducting data collection. An example is already reported foods can easily be copied. So that saves time by enumerators not having to re-enter details on the food. It also allows data to be collected consistently across the survey through use of probes to guide enumerators. These are the food descriptors that Sarah mentioned. And also each version of the INDDEX24 mobile app can have up to 4 languages. So if a survey is being conducted in a context where multiple languages are used, you can include up to 4 languages in your survey. So continuing on with highlights from the INDDEX24 analytical reports. This is a tool to assist users with data processing, which we know is a common stumbling block in dietary surveys. And the 2 main features of the analytical reports are the gaps report to assist researchers in identifying gaps in the data collected, specifically foods or recipes that have been reported during the 24-hour recall that require additional information such as food composition data or portion conversion factors. And secondly, the analytical reports also provide a very simple summary statistics report that researchers can use as part of their analysis plan. And then we also wanted to highlight that the data from the INDDEX24 analytical reports can be exported to statistical software or analytical software such as Tableau for further analysis. So researchers are not limited to the reports themselves and the output from the reports. So now that you've heard about some of the highlights on the individual components of the INDDEX24 platform, I just want to take a moment to highlight some of the key benefits of the platform as a whole. So we recognize that many dietary surveys end up being inefficient as they require starting from the beginning each time, with researchers needing to compile food composition details and conversion factors and so forth. INDDEX24 was designed so that you do not need to reinvent the wheel with each new survey and can instead build off of dietary reference data from previous surveys that are housed in the Global Food Matters database. Second, we've also designed INDDEX24 to be adaptable across varied contexts, allowing food lists, languages, and other context-specific details to be easily modifiable for different survey contexts. At the same time, the platform has been designed to standardize data collection according to global best practices using the multiple pass 24-hour recall method, which Jenny described earlier. And the platform also contains built-in help and hint text that appears throughout the mobile app. In recognizing that the data processing and cleaning step can be a large bottleneck, the INDDEX24 analytical reporting feature is designed to aid in streamlining this process by matching foods with food composition values and conversion factors, ultimately resulting in a set of processed data and basic summary statistics. Lastly, the rigorous validation studies that the INDDEX project has conducted in Burkina Faso and Vietnam, through the rigorous validation studies that the project has conducted in Burkina Faso and Vietnam, we've determined that these design considerations taken together will shorten the total time and cost required from start to finish of a dietary survey. So some of you may be aware that the INDDEX project publicly launched the INDDEX24 platform this month. This slide includes details on our rollout and scale up process. So our phase 1 was our phase of enrolling early adopters. This occurred from September 2020 up until last month, May of 2021. We enrolled 3 early adopters listed on the screen, the IITA and Government of Nigeria, who are conducting a national food composition survey using INDDEX24. Also, Helen Keller International's ARCH study in Cambodia, and IRD in Burkina Faso are our other 2 early adopters. So moving forward into phase 2, we are enrolling early users of the platform starting this month with our public launch through December 2021. And so we currently have 1 early user who's enrolled, Helen Keller International's ARCH study in Senegal. And we're also currently enrolling other early users and have limited spots available. So please contact us if you're interested. And then looking forward to phase 3, the platform will be available to general users. And in this phase of the project, as well as currently, we're working to further reduce the cost of the INDDEX24 mobile app. Another big part of our focus is populating the Global Food Matters database with data from additional countries, as well as focusing on incrementally improving the platform based on feedback from our early adopters, as well as other early users. So that concludes our overview of the platform. And we have about 5 minutes or so that we can use to take some questions that have come through. Let's see, Jenny, I don't know if Jenny or Winnie, I don't know if either of you had any questions that popped up that you thought maybe we should tackle during these next couple minutes. Let me just refer.
Not yet. So let's just open it up.
Okay.
I think most of the questions in the chat so far have been directed to the GIFT team. So yes, if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. One thing that I think while we're waiting, Brooke, that you could speak to, if you don't mind, is the cost structure. And so this platform has 2 main components to it, right? The Global Food Matters database, as well as the INDDEX24 mobile app. And these are, really different pieces, even though they're complementary. So could you explain a little bit more, Brooke, about the INDDEX24 mobile app and how that works and how people can get started on that, and then also the cost that's associated with that and why there's a cost, and then also touch on the Global Food Matters database, which is a free public good.
Sure. So thanks for making clear that distinction. So just starting off with the Global Food Matters database, as Jenny mentioned, this is an accessible global public good. So we invite people to get in touch with us if they're interested in accessing the database. But this database will be open to the public, and any user that's interested in obtaining dietary reference data can access the Global Food Matters database. The INDDEX24 mobile app does have a cost associated with it. We're currently looking, we're in an early stage of our costing exercise, but in this early stage, we have determined that the INDDEX24 mobile app will cost users $5,000 for use in a dietary survey. And Jenny, please feel free to jump in at any point. But the survey, or the INDDEX24 mobile app, has a cost associated with it to cover the cost associated with maintaining the mobile app and its platform and hosting and so on. And there's also a minimum cost that is needed in order to just sustain the platform. So as I mentioned just towards the end of my presentation, we are looking into ways to, over time, minimize that cost, but that is the cost of accessing the mobile app at the moment. Jenny, would you like to add anything?
No, thanks, Brooke. I just put a little bit of additional information in the chat, just so people know that that's the average cost and that it varies depending on the size and duration of the survey. So, you know, please feel free to get in touch with us if you're interested in using INDDEX24, and we'll be able to help you understand better what the cost implications would be. Thank you very much, Brooke. So I want to also leave a little bit of additional time in case people have other questions that they'd like to direct to the FAO GIFT team. So feel free to also pop those in the chat. But let's see, we have now a few questions coming in. So one person asks, with the cost associated with the app, would there be bespoke support for adapting the app, especially with respect to languages and translation? So very good question, Jasmine. So Brooke, could you go ahead with that question, please?
Sure. So the fee associated with using the mobile app doesn't cover costs of the index project making adaptations such as the language translation. But we are available to assist with the user's work in using the survey interface, excuse me, in order to make those changes to the mobile app, but that the actual translation service is not provided by the index project.
Okay, thanks, Brooke. But yeah, and maybe just to build on that a little bit more, I think that is kind of one example of a type of support, which has to do with language and translation. However, there is a lot of other support that we do provide. So kind of from start to finish, we would work with your team in order to adapt the app specifically for your context. So that entails also supporting you in setting up your data in the global FMDB, which is the contextualized data that you need in order to carry out the survey. From also providing training materials along the way, supporting the team while they're in the field collecting the data, so assisting with data monitoring and quality checking, as well as providing support to your team for the analysis stage of your process. So I just wanted to make that clear. And maybe one more point with regard to the language is that we do actually have the app already translated into the major UN languages minus Arabic, which is something we're working on right now. So that is a starting point for anybody who's interested in implementing with one of those languages. And then another thing that I'll just mention with regard to language is that even though the translation to a non-UN language would need to be done by your own team, first of all, it's something that we would support. And second of all, the apps themselves do support the kind of toggling between, I think this is something that Sarah and Brooke mentioned, that you can toggle between multiple languages while you're in the field. So as long as you set it up that way in advance, you could start off the interview process in English, let's say, and then you get to a respondent who is primarily Spanish speaking, and you can automatically toggle to the Spanish version if you have an enumerator who can speak with that level of facility. Okay, so thank you all. There's some very good questions coming in now, and we are planning to follow up with any of the questions that we weren't able to address right now. We will follow up by email after the fact. And in the meantime, for the wrap up, because we just have a few minutes left, I'd like to hand it back over to my colleague at FAO, Bridget Holmes. Bridget?
Thank you very much, Jenny. I think there's just one last slide. Just to summarize, thanks ever so much for participating in our Learning Lab today. So we hope that you have understood a bit more about the uses and the pros and cons of 24-hour recalls compared to dietary screeners. Thanks very much for volunteering and raising your hands in our different exercises. We hope that you've also understood a few of the possible ways to use dietary data that is available freely through the FAO WHO GIFT platform, and that you've also understood the key features of the INDDEX24 Dietary Assessment Platform. So really, just to reiterate that the first step towards any effective intervention is having reliable dietary data on which to base programs and policies. And 24-hour recall data and dietary screeners provide different but complementary information. So the 24-hour recall data is much more detailed and has potentially many more uses. So the FAO WHO GIFT platform that we presented and that you tested yourselves in the breakout sessions presents dietary data using easy to understand graphics, and these help to inform policies. So as we mentioned already, if you have any dietary data to share or you're interested in getting in touch with us, please don't hesitate to reach out. And likewise for the INDDEX24 team. So INDDEX24, as you've heard about from Jenny and her team, is an integrated dietary research platform that leverages the Global Food Matters database and the INDDEX24 mobile app to accelerate food and nutrition research in low and middle income countries. And again, as Jenny mentioned, if you want to know any more information or you've got an interest in using INDDEX24 in your research or studies, then don't hesitate to contact the team. So with that, I think we'd just like to say thanks very much for your patience while we had the technical glitches at the beginning of the lab. And I'd like to hand over to Hallie. I think she will be undertaking an evaluation poll. So thanks very much from everybody here.